The 2021 season saw the introduction of sprints to Formula One, initially at 3 different locations. This season, the number has been increased to 6, beginning with this weekend's race in Azerbaijan. This year's sprints will also feature a change in the format of the entire race weekend, with an additional qualifying session held to determine the sprint grid. It means there will only be 1 hour of practice for the entire weekend, which Red Bull star Max Verstappen has scathed at. The 2-time F1 champion said recently, "I hope there won't be too many changes, otherwise I won't be around for too long. I am not a fan of it at all. When we do all that kind of stuff, the weekend becomes very intense and we already do a lot of races." Verstappen's remarks served as a warning to F1 executives facing the possibility of losing one of the sport's biggest stars, but Ralf Schumacher, who won 6 Grand Prix during his career, doesn't fear the idea of Verstappen's early retirement. Instead, Michael Schumacher's brother believes the sport will thrive with or without Verstappen in the future. The past, the present, and the future have shown or will show that Formula One is much bigger than any individual. Bernie Ecclestone is also gone, and without him, Formula One wouldn't exist, and now it's more successful than ever. So, Verstappen should either pack up and leave, or just accept it as it is. I understand his attitude because there are a lot of risks due to the increased number of sprints, but still, he gets paid to do it. But again, if he wants to go, then he has to go. That's what Formula One will become, not perish, much as I love him. While Verstappen has been critical of not only the sprint format, but also the decision to hold one in Baku, he will no doubt be aiming for maximum points, no matter the format, in order to maintain his title challenge. And the 2-time world champion predicts that the race he won last year would be slightly chaotic as Formula One held its first sprint race of the season. Baku is a challenging track to get right. As it's a street circuit with long straights, it gives us multiple options on what wings we can run, Verstappen said. It's also the first sprint race weekend of the season, so that might make it slightly chaotic. It's not only the first sprint race of the season, but it is also the first under a new format that was approved on Tuesday. There is now only 1 practice session on Friday morning, and there is a separate qualifying session to determine both the race grid and the sprint grid. Verstappen stressed how important it was to make the most of FP1 and said the team needed to ensure they got off to a good start to the weekend. He has also shed some additional light on his previous remarks, explaining that rather than elements such as sprint races dictating what he does in terms of his career, what matters far more to him is the overall state of F1 and the demands that it places on drivers. When asked by motorsport.com if he would really quit F1 because of sprint races, Verstappen said, "I think I always said that even if there won't be any more sprint races, if we keep expanding the calendar and the whole weekend is that long, at one point you question yourself, is it worth it? I do like racing, I do like winning, I know that, but of course there is a salary and everything and you have a good life, but is it actually a good life? I think sometimes you get to a point in your career where maybe you want to do other stuff. I have the contract until the end of 2028 and then we'll review again, but I do feel that if it's getting to one point too much, then it's time for a change." Verstappen has been hinting at his eventual F1 retirement for quite some time, longer than those who believe his remarks in Australia were novel may realize. Those latest remarks are just 2 sides of the same coin. He doesn't like F1's endless expansion. Verstappen stated last year that his current Red Bull contract could be his final. He's signed up until the end of 2028 and by then he'll be 31 and might be ready to call it quits and race somewhere else. It's something he's genuinely excited about. Verstappen has frequently mentioned endurance racing as a discipline in which he wishes to compete, and he has frequently competed in such events in sim racing. This is the external pull factor, but there's also a push factor. Verstappen is not a fan to the increasingly crowded F1 calendar and believes he will tire of it sooner or later. He stated a few weeks ago that the idea of 24 or 25 races should be met with shorter weekends rather than ever intense ones. Any questions about sprint races tend to elicit this attitude from him again, because sprints represent more of the relentless expansion he desires. There are other aspects of F1 that he dislikes, but the sprint races will only serve to drive Verstappen out of the sport as part of a larger picture. It's therefore a stretch to interpret anything Verstappen has said about sprints as a quit threat. It just adds to the fact that he's keeping his long-term options open rather than simply assuming he'll race until his normal F1 career expires. Another push factor that could drive Verstappen out of the sport sooner is his relationship with teammate Sergio Perez. After 3 races, Perez has told the world that he's ready to take on his Red Bull teammate Verstappen for the World Championship. This, combined with problems at last year's Sao Paulo Grand Prix and more this year in Saudi Arabia, where the Mexican driver questioned Red Bull's intra-team communication, has the media talking about growing tensions between the teammates. Both drivers have repeatedly stated that everything is fine, as has their team boss, Christian Horner. But the squabbles over fastest laps, team communication, and deleted tweets have kept the media interested. However, Dutch driver Michael Bleek-Molen believes the media has grossly exaggerated the rivalry between Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. There is always a battle between two drivers in every team, not only in Formula 1, but everywhere. It is one thing that you have to be faster. I also think that the media is a bit guilty of it. Everything is just thrown together with exciting statements. Phrases are cut out to stick it together differently. Then they suddenly turn into hateful comments towards each other. I think it's not that bad. Still, I think they both want to finish for each other. He does admit, however, that Perez occasionally puts his foot in it with bizarre comments in which he brags about his own ability being on par with Verstappen's. Perez sometimes says strange things, yes, Bleek-Molen added. He also says that he is just as fast as Max and he's not inferior. Of course, that is not the case. The statistics prove that. Those are, of course, strange statements. Of course, he shouts that he is king on the street circuits. If we look very realistically, he of course won Monaco and now Saudi Arabia, but that is all due to the circumstances, not because he was faster than Max. Apparently, he never looks that realistic. After saying it shows who he really is when Verstappen refused to assist him at the Sao Paulo Grand Prix last year, Perez arrived on the grid this year talking about respect being a two-way street. And if he didn't receive help and respect, he wouldn't be giving it. A month later, the Mexican driver was preaching respect once more, this time in the aftermath of Red Bull's team communication at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Why would there be a need to call for respect and cooperation if it was already present? We'll leave it to you to guess. Nonetheless, things could have developed much faster if it hadn't been for a certain Australian reserve driver. Daniel Ricciardo rejoined Red Bull as a third driver after being let go by McLaren, making his first trackside appearance in Melbourne last time out. But his return to F1 appears to be just as far away as it was when he left the sport last year, with the Australian recently revealing that he will only return if it is for a top team. Despite having one eye on next season and his F1 future, Ricciardo appears to have settled into a new role at Red Bull, which is part test driver, part PR man, and team boss Christian Horner revealed one of the main aspects he is assisting with is driver relationships. He's a big energy guy, Horner told Red Bull's Talking Bull podcast. Max learned a lot from him when he was here in the early years, and I think that Daniel's performing a different role this year. I think having his energy around the two drivers, it makes him feel more at ease. It's less awkward between the two of them, particularly when the two of them are competing against each other and they both genuinely like him because he's just that kind of guy. You can't dislike Daniel Ricciardo. Regardless, it will be interesting to see how the Red Bull team rivalry develops and whether or not it affects Verstappen's retirement plans. But what are your thoughts? Will Verstappen retire at the end of his current contract? What about his fight with Perez? Could the Mexican fight for the title this year? Please let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to be notified when new videos are uploaded. And if you want to learn more about Formula 1, watch this video right now. Enjoy.